She had nothing left, until a stranger left her a cabin hiding a secret worth $265 million. The morning started the same as every other. Cold air, stiff bones, and the low rumble of trucks above her parked SUV. Evelyn Hart hadn't planned for anything to change that day, but the envelope in her hands said otherwise. A name she barely remembered, a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and something about it didn't feel like luck. If you were in her place, would you trust it or walk away? The first sound was the trucks. Not one, not two, a steady line of them, heavy wheels rolling above her like distant thunder that never quite faded. The overpass carried the noise in waves, low, constant, pressing down through the concrete and into the metal frame of the SUV. Evelyn Hart opened her eyes without moving. For a moment, she stayed still, listening, feeling the vibration hum faintly through the seat beneath her back. It wasn't enough to shake anything loose, just enough to remind her where she was. The air inside the vehicle had gone stale overnight. A mix of old fabric, faint engine oil, and the dry, dusty smell that came with living too long in one place that wasn't meant to be lived in. She exhaled slowly. Her breath clouded the inside of the window for a second, then disappeared. Morning, or close enough. Light filtered in from the side, thin and gray, slipping through a gap in the overpass above. It landed across the dashboard, catching the dust that had settled there in a fine, even layer. Evelyn pushed herself upright, slow and careful. Her back protested first, then her shoulders, then the stiffness in her neck followed, like a delayed echo. She sat there for a second, one hand braced on the steering wheel, waiting for her body to catch up. The blanket had slipped halfway to the floor during the night. She reached down, picked it up, and shook it once, more out of habit than purpose. The fabric was thin now, worn smooth in places where her hands had folded it the same way every morning. She folded it again, neatly, edges aligned, corners pressed flat. Routine mattered. Even here. Especially here. Outside, a car passed slowly along the service road, tires crunching over gravel. Somewhere farther off, a door slammed. Then silence again, broken only by the steady rhythm of trucks overhead. Evelyn leaned forward and rubbed her hands together. Her fingers were stiff, the joints swollen in a way she no longer questioned. Then she reached for the small tin box. It sat tucked beside the center console, just where she always kept it, out of sight unless you knew where to look. The metal surface was scratched, the original paint long gone except for faint patches of blue near the edges. She opened it carefully. Inside, everything was exactly where it had been the night before. A wristwatch. Old. Silver. The face slightly fogged along the edges. The leather strap worn soft from years of use. It no longer ticked, but she kept it wound anyway, out of habit. Underneath it, a folded stack of papers, documents she didn't need to read again to remember what they said. Eviction notices, a medical bill she never paid, a photocopy of a marriage certificate that felt like it belonged to someone else now. She touched the watch lightly, just once, then closed the lid. Outside, a low engine rumble drifted closer. Not from above this time, but from the road nearby. Slower, idling. Evelyn glanced toward the side mirror. The outreach van. White. Faded lettering along the side. She had seen it before. Not every day, but often enough. They came through the area in the mornings. Coffee sometimes. Basic supplies. Questions she didn't always answer. She hesitated, then reached for the door handle. The air outside was cooler than she expected. It carried a dry edge mixed with the faint scent of asphalt warming under early light. A woman stepped down from the van, holding a clipboard in one hand. Mid-40s, maybe. Hair pulled back, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone used to being watched and ignored at the same time. "Morning," the woman said, not too loud. Evelyn gave a small nod. "Morning." They stood there for a second. Not awkward, just measuring. The woman glanced at the clipboard, then back at Evelyn. Evelyn Hart. Evelyn's brow tightened slightly. Yes. The woman reached into the van and pulled out an envelope. Thick, off-white, the kind you didn't see often anymore. "Got something for you," she said, holding it out. "Registered mail. Came through the office yesterday." Evelyn didn't take it right away. She looked at the envelope first. Her name was written across the front, not printed. Written. Careful, deliberate strokes, the kind of handwriting that took its time. She didn't recognize it. "Do you know who it's from?" Evelyn asked. The woman shook her head. "No return name, just an address up top." Evelyn reached out slowly and took it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She turned it over once in her hands, then back again. Her name stared up at her from the front, quiet and certain. For a moment, the sound of the trucks faded. Or maybe she just stopped hearing them. "Thank you," she said finally. The woman gave a small nod. "We'll be around if you need anything." Evelyn didn't answer that. She rarely did. The van door slid shut. The engine picked up again, then rolled slowly away, tires crunching over gravel until the sound disappeared around the bend. Evelyn stood there under the overpass, the envelope in her hand. The concrete above stretched long and gray, catching the early light in uneven patches. A truck passed overhead, louder this time, the vibration running through the ground beneath her feet. She looked down at the envelope again. Her name. Written by someone who knew exactly where to find her. Evelyn turned, walked back to the SUV, and sat down in the driver's seat. The door closed with a dull, familiar sound. For a long moment, she didn't open it. She just held it there, listening, breathing, as if whatever was inside could wait a little longer, or as if she needed one more quiet second before something changed. Above her, another truck passed, and the morning kept moving forward. Evelyn sat in the driver's seat, the envelope resting across her lap. The sound of the engine overhead faded into the background again, settling into that familiar rhythm she had learned to ignore. But the weight in her hands, that didn't fade. She turned the envelope over once more. The paper was thick, not the kind you got from a bank or a collection agency. No window panel, no stamped barcode, just her name. Written clean, careful, intentional. Evelyn slid a finger under the sealed edge and paused. Then, slowly, she opened it. Inside was a letter. 2 pages, folded precisely. Along with it, a smaller slip of paper, what looked like a check. She pulled the letter out first. Her eyes moved across the top line, then stopped. She read it again. And then once more, slower, named as the sole beneficiary. The words didn't make sense the first time, or the second. Evelyn leaned back slightly in the seat, the paper trembling just enough to catch the light. Property located in Gallatin County, Montana. Montana. She hadn't been that far north in decades. A cabin structure and surrounding acreage. Her mouth tightened. Not disbelief, exactly. Something closer to resistance, left by the late Thomas Bellamy. The name landed differently. Not unfamiliar. Just distant. Evelyn lowered the paper slightly and stared at nothing for a moment, her mind moving through old rooms it hadn't opened in years. Thomas Bellamy. She said it quietly under her breath. The name stirred something, but not clearly, like trying to remember a face you only saw once in a crowd. She looked back down at the letter. All property taxes paid in advance. No outstanding liens. Her eyes drifted to the check. She picked it up. $1,500. Enough for gas. Maybe more than that. Evelyn let out a short breath through her nose. That doesn't make sense, she murmured. She folded the letter back along its original lines, slower this time, more deliberate, then set it beside her on the passenger seat. Her gaze moved toward the tin box. For a moment, she didn't reach for it. Then she did. The metal lid opened with a soft click. She shifted the papers inside, lifting the folded stack until something thin slipped loose from the bottom. A photograph. It had been there the whole time. She just hadn't looked at it in a while. Evelyn held it up to the light. The edges were worn, the image slightly faded. A small group of people stood outside a church, dressed in dark clothes, faces still, composed in that way people are when they don't know what to do with grief in public. Her husband stood in the center, younger, healthier, before the hospital beds, before the quiet. Evelyn's eyes moved across the photo, then stopped. In the background, off to one side, slightly out of focus, a man. Tall, lean, hands folded in front of him, not looking at the camera, looking at something else or someone else. Evelyn brought the photo closer. Thomas Bellamy. She didn't remember speaking to him that day, didn't remember him coming over, didn't remember a conversation. But she remembered the feeling. Someone standing just outside the circle. Watching. Evelyn lowered the photograph slowly. That's you, she said under her breath. The memory didn't fill in. It just confirmed itself. She placed the photo back in the tin box, but not at the bottom this time. She left it on top. Then she picked up the letter again. Her eyes scanned the return address. A law office. Bozeman, Montana. She stared at it for a long moment, then leaned forward and reached for her phone. The battery indicator blinked low. She hesitated, then turned the key halfway in the ignition. The dashboard flickered to life, the faint hum of power returning to the system. Enough. She dialed the number listed in the letter. It rang twice. A man answered. Stanton and Burke Law Offices. Evelyn sat up straighter. My name is Evelyn Hart, she said. I received a letter this morning about a property. There was a pause. Then the man's tone shifted just slightly. Yes, Ms. Hart. We were expecting your call. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the phone. You're saying this is real? Yes, ma'am. Thomas Bellamy named you specifically in his will. The transfer has already been processed. The property is legally yours. Evelyn glanced down at the letter again. And the taxes? Paid in full. Mr. Bellamy made arrangements well in advance. Evelyn swallowed. How long ago did he pass? Approximately 6 months ago. 6 months. She hadn't known, didn't even know she was supposed to know. "And you're certain," she began, then stopped. The question didn't finish itself. The man waited. Evelyn tried again. "You're certain you have the right person?" A soft exhale on the other end. "Yes, Ms. Hart. We verified your identity through multiple records. There's no error." Evelyn closed her eyes for a second. The trucks overhead passed again, louder now, or maybe just closer. "And the cabin?" she asked. "It's located outside a small township, remote area but structurally sound from all reports." "Remote." She nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see her. "I see." There was a brief silence. "If you choose to claim the property in person," the man added, "the check enclosed should cover your travel expenses." Evelyn looked at the check again, then at the road beyond the windshield, then back at the letter. "Thank you," she said finally. She ended the call before he could say anything else. The engine clicked softly as she turned the key back. Silence returned. Evelyn sat there for a long time, the letter in her hand, the photograph in the box, the name still echoing in her mind. Thomas Bellamy. A man she barely knew, who had somehow known exactly where to find her. And left her something she didn't ask for. She leaned back in the seat. The overpass stretched above her, unchanged. The same trucks, the same dust, the same life. But something had shifted. Not visibly, not yet. Just enough to make everything feel slightly out of place. Evelyn looked down at the envelope one more time, then folded it carefully and placed it back inside. Evelyn sat there with her hands resting on the steering wheel, the envelope now tucked back into itself, as if closing it could quiet whatever had just been opened. It didn't. The overpass above her carried another wave of trucks. The sound rolled through the metal frame of the SUV, low and constant, familiar, predictable. Everything else felt less certain. She turned her head slowly, looking through the windshield at the empty stretch of road ahead. A stray plastic bag moved across the pavement, caught in a light wind, dragging and lifting in uneven bursts. Montana. The word stayed with her. Not as a place, not yet, just a direction. She reached over and picked up the envelope again, not to open it, just to feel its weight one more time. The check inside shifted slightly as she tilted it. Real, tangible, too real to ignore. Evelyn let out a breath and set it back down. "No," she said quietly, "not like that." She had learned that lesson the hard way. Nothing came without cost, and anything that looked simple usually wasn't. Her eyes moved to the tin box again. She opened it, slower this time, and lifted the photograph back out, held it between her fingers. Her husband's face, the man in the background. Thomas Bellamy. She studied him longer now. Not the shape of his face, but the posture, the way he stood slightly apart. Not distant exactly, just not part of things. Watching. Evelyn frowned slightly. "Why me?" she murmured. There was no answer in the photograph. She set it back into the box and closed the lid. The silence inside the SUV settled again. Then her phone buzzed. The sound startled her more than it should have. She looked down at the screen. A name she hadn't seen in a long time. Derek Hale. Her nephew. Evelyn stared at it for a second before answering. "Hello?" "Hey, Aunt Evelyn." His voice came through too quickly, too familiar for someone who hadn't called in. She couldn't remember how long. "You got something in the mail this morning," he continued, not even pausing for a greeting. Evelyn's grip tightened slightly on the phone. "Who told you that?" There was a short pause. Not long enough to be honest. "Word gets around," Derek said lightly. "You know how it is." She didn't. Not anymore. "I heard it's about some property," he went on. "Montana, right?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. She watched a car pass by in the distance, the sun catching its windshield for a moment before it disappeared around the bend. "Why are you calling, Derek?" she asked finally. Another pause. Then his tone shifted, softer, almost concerned. "I just don't want you getting into something you don't understand," he said. "Legal stuff like that. It can get complicated fast. You should have someone look at it. Someone who knows what they're doing." Evelyn leaned back slightly in her seat. "I already spoke to the law office," she said. "They confirmed everything." "Yeah, but that doesn't mean—" He stopped himself, then tried again. "Look, I've got a friend who handles property transfers, real estate stuff. I could connect you. Make sure everything's handled right." Handled. The word sat wrong. Evelyn's eyes narrowed just slightly. "And what would that cost me?" she asked. Derek laughed, quick and dismissive. "Nothing up front. Just standard percentage if anything gets sold. You wouldn't have to deal with any of it." Evelyn didn't respond. She looked down at her hands, at the faint lines of dirt that never quite washed away, at the small scars she didn't remember getting. "You're assuming I want to sell it," she said. Another pause. "Well, don't you?" Derek asked. Evelyn lifted her gaze again, looking out through the windshield. The road, the dust, the overpass above. Everything she knew. "I haven't decided anything," she said. Derek exhaled slowly on the other end. "Just think about it, okay?" he said. "You don't have to figure it out alone." Evelyn almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was familiar. "I've been figuring things out alone for a long time," she said quietly. There was nothing for him to say to that. "Call me when you're ready," he added quickly. "We'll take care of it." The line clicked. Evelyn lowered the phone slowly and set it on the dashboard. The SUV felt smaller now. Not physically. Just closer. She reached for the envelope again. Opened it this time. The letter. The check. She laid them both out on the passenger seat. Looked at them. Then looked at everything else. The folded blanket. The empty water bottle rolling slightly on the floor. The cracked plastic on the dashboard. 11 months, that's how long she'd been here. Not this exact spot, but places like it. Parking lots, side streets, under bridges. Always temporary, always moving, always waiting for something to give. Evelyn ran a hand slowly across the steering wheel, then stopped. "All right," she said under her breath. Not loud, not dramatic, just decided. She turned the key again. The engine coughed once, then caught. The sound filled the space, steady and real. Evelyn let it run for a moment, then reached over, pulled the envelope closer, and tucked it into the glove compartment. Not hidden, just placed, where she could reach it. Her eyes moved to the rearview mirror. For a second, She saw herself the way someone else might. Gray hair pulled back loosely, lines at the corners of her eyes, a face that had learned how to endure more than it ever planned to. She held that look for a moment, then shifted her gaze forward. The road ahead was still empty, but it didn't feel the same. Not anymore. She turned the wheel slightly, easing the SUV out from its spot beneath the overpass. Gravel crunched under the tires as she pulled onto the service road. The sound of the trucks faded behind her. Not gone. Just further away. Evelyn drove slowly at first, not in a hurry, letting the movement settle in. At the next intersection, she stopped, looked left, then right. The city stretched out in both directions. Familiar, unchanged. She tightened her grip on the wheel, then made her choice. She turned toward the library. If she was going to do this, she wasn't going to walk into it blind. The library opened at 9. Evelyn parked 2 blocks away, easing the SUV into a space between a faded pickup and a rusted sedan that looked like it hadn't moved in months. The engine ticked softly after she turned it off, heat settling back into metal. She sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel. Then she reached into the glove compartment, pulled out the envelope, and stepped out into the morning. Inside, the library smelled like paper and quiet air, the kind of place where time slowed without asking permission. A few people sat scattered across the tables. No one looked up. Evelyn moved straight to the front desk. The woman behind it gave her a polite nod. "Can I help you?" "I need to look up property records," Evelyn said. "Out of state." The woman gestured toward a row of computers. "Public access terminals. You can search by county or name." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you." She sat down slowly, adjusting the chair until it didn't creak. The screen flickered as she tapped the keyboard, the motion unfamiliar at first, then steady. Gallatin County, Montana. She typed it in carefully, double-checking each letter. The system loaded, slow but responsive. A list of records appeared. Evelyn leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly. There it was. Thomas Bellamy. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad before clicking. The page opened. Property details, parcel number, acreage, 42.6 acres. Cabin structure, no liens, no outstanding taxes. She scrolled. Payment history stretched back years, every entry marked as paid, not late, not missed, not even close. Evelyn sat back slightly. "That's not an accident," she murmured. She clicked through additional records. Ownership transfer finalized 2 weeks ago. Her name, Evelyn Hart. It was all there. Clean, complete, verified. She stared at the screen longer than she needed to, then printed everything. The machine hummed as the pages came through. She gathered them carefully, aligning the edges before folding them once and slipping them into the envelope. On her way out, she stopped at a rack near the entrance. Folded maps hung in plastic sleeves, state highways, regional routes. She pulled one down. Montana. The paper cracked slightly as she unfolded it. Roads stretched across the surface in thin red lines, towns marked in small black print. She traced a finger slowly across the map. Albuquerque, up through Colorado, then north. Gallatin County. It was farther than she expected. Of course it was. She folded the map again and paid in cash at the desk. The coins felt heavier leaving her hand than they had that morning. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. The air was warmer now, carrying the dry edge of midday. Evelyn stood beside the SUV for a moment, looking at the map again, then at the road, then back at the envelope. She opened the passenger door and placed everything neatly on the seat. Maps, documents, letter, all of it in one place. No more guessing. She got in and closed the door. For a while, she didn't move. Her eyes drifted across the dashboard, the cracked plastic, the faint dust settling into the seams. This had been her world. Contained, manageable, predictable. She reached back and pulled the folded blanket from behind her seat, ran her hand across it once, then set it down again. There wasn't much to pack. That made it easier. Or maybe harder. Evelyn started the engine. The sound filled the space again, familiar and steady. She drove to a small pawn shop on the edge of town, the kind with barred windows and a bell that rang too loud when you opened the door. Inside, the man behind the counter barely looked up. She placed a small stack of items on the glass, a spare flashlight, a portable radio, a set of tools she had carried for years. He glanced at them. 15, he said. Evelyn didn't argue. She nodded once, took the cash. Back outside, she counted it, added it to what she already had. Not much, but enough. She drove next to a gas station, filled the tank halfway, watching the numbers climb slower than she wanted. When the pump clicked off, she stood there a second longer, hand resting on the handle, then replaced it. Back in the SUV, she unfolded the map across the steering wheel. The route stretched long. Days of driving. Unknown roads. Unknown place. Evelyn studied it carefully, memorizing turns, highways, distances. Her finger moved slowly along the lines, tracing the path she would take. She folded it again, placed it beside the envelope, then leaned back in her seat. The city moved around her, cars passing, doors opening and closing, people stepping in and out of places that had walls and roofs and addresses. Evelyn watched it all, then looked forward. The road ahead didn't look any different, but it felt like it was waiting. She adjusted her grip on the wheel, took a breath, and pulled out onto the street. The buildings began to thin as she drove, concrete giving way to open space, the edges of the city fading behind her in slow increments. The overpass was gone. The sound of trucks replaced by wind pushing lightly against the side of the vehicle. Evelyn kept her eyes on the road, hands steady. No hesitation now, just movement. North, towards something she hadn't asked for. Towards something she wasn't sure she trusted, but something she wasn't going to ignore. The highway stretched ahead in a long, straight line. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't look back. The road stretched out in front of her like it had nowhere to end. Evelyn drove for hours that first day. The city fell behind quickly, replaced by long stretches of dry land and distant hills that seemed to shift color depending on the light. Gas stations came and went, small towns with faded signs, places where no one asked questions. She didn't stop unless she had to. At night, she pulled into a rest area just past the state line. The air was colder there, sharper. It slipped through the cracks of the SUV and settled into her bones as she tried to sleep. She didn't sleep much. The next morning, she kept going. The landscape changed slowly. Dry earth gave way to patches of green, then trees, taller ones, closer together. The road narrowed in places, bending more often, rising and falling in long, steady curves. By the third day, the air smelled different, cleaner, quieter. When she finally turned off the main highway, the tires rolled over gravel instead of pavement. The sound was louder than she expected, echoing in the silence around her. She slowed the SUV, checked the map again, then drove on. The road narrowed further, lined now with tall pines that blocked most of the sky. Sunlight filtered through in thin, shifting lines, moving across the hood of the vehicle as she passed beneath them. No houses, no signs. Just forest. Evelyn's grip on the wheel tightened slightly. "Keep going," she said to herself. The road curved once more, and then it opened. A small clearing. The cabin sat at the edge of it. Evelyn eased the SUV to a stop, turned off the engine. The silence that followed was complete. No traffic. No distant voices. Just wind moving through the trees. She stayed in the seat for a long moment, hands resting on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. The cabin wasn't large. 2 stories, built from thick logs darkened by age and weather. The roof sloped sharply, metal sheets worn but intact. A stone chimney rose from the center, solid and unmoving. It didn't look abandoned. It looked finished, like someone had built it to last and then simply stepped away. Evelyn stepped out of the SUV. The ground beneath her feet was firm, packed dirt with scattered pine needles. The air carried the scent of sap and something faintly metallic underneath. She closed the door quietly behind her. Even that sound felt too loud here. She walked slowly toward the cabin, her steps measured, eyes scanning everything without seeming to focus on anything in particular. The porch creaked once under her weight. Not weak, just old. The front door stood directly ahead. She reached for the handle, paused, then pushed it open. The hinges made a low sound, but the door moved easily. Inside, the air was cool, not stale, not dusty in the way abandoned places usually were. There was a smell, wood mostly, cedar, and something else she couldn't place right away. Evelyn stepped in, closed the door behind her. The room opened up around her in a quiet, deliberate way. A large main space, wooden beams overhead, a stone fireplace dominating one wall, shelves lined neatly along another, filled with books arranged by size and subject. Everything was in its place. Tools hung on a rack near the back, each one aligned precisely. A table sat near the window, clear except for a single folded cloth. No clutter, no disorder. Evelyn moved slowly through the room, her eyes tracing the edges of things. She ran a finger lightly along a shelf. No dust, not enough to suggest neglect. "That's strange," she murmured. She stepped into the kitchen area. A hand pump stood over the sink. Metal, polished in places where it had been used often. Cabinets closed. Clean. She opened one. Inside, jars, labeled, dates written in careful handwriting. Not recent, but not forgotten either. Evelyn closed the cabinet gently. The floor creaked beneath her as she crossed the room. She paused. Listened. The sound of her own footsteps echoed slightly differently near the far wall. She stepped back, then forward again. Same sound. She frowned. Walked the same path once more, slower this time. The echo changed. Not much. Just enough. Evelyn turned her head, looking down at the floor as if it might explain itself. "It shouldn't sound like that," she said quietly. She moved across the room, testing different areas. Near the door, solid. By the table, consistent. Back toward the far wall, different again. She crouched slightly, pressing her palm flat against the wooden boards. Cold. Colder than the rest of the floor. Evelyn straightened slowly. Her eyes lifted, scanning the wall in front of her. Nothing obvious. No seams, no markings. Just wood. Carefully fitted. She walked the perimeter of the room, counted her steps without thinking about it, then stopped, turned, and counted again. Same result. She moved back toward the center, then to the opposite wall. Counting, comparing. Her brow tightened. "That's not right," she said under her breath. She stepped outside again, walked along the outer wall of the cabin, her hand brushing lightly against the logs as she moved. Counting steps. Measuring distance in the simplest way she could. She reached the corner, turned, kept going. When she came back around to the front, she stopped, looked at the cabin, then back at the door, then inside again. Evelyn walked back in, slower this time. Her eyes moved across the space, not just seeing it now, but mapping it, comparing what she had just counted outside with what she felt inside. The numbers didn't match. Not exactly. Not even close enough to ignore. She stood in the center of the room, very still, listening. The silence pressed in again, thick and steady. Evelyn turned slowly, taking it all in. The walls, the floor, the fireplace. Everything exactly where it should be. Except, it wasn't. "There's more here," she said quietly. Not a guess. Not a question. A conclusion. She moved toward the corner again. Stepped across the same section of floor. Listened to the echo shift beneath her weight. Then looked down. Her expression didn't change much. But something behind her eyes sharpened. Evelyn wasn't thinking about leaving anymore. She wasn't thinking about Derek, or the road, or the city she had come from. She was thinking about this room, this space, and what didn't belong. She walked back to the door and closed it fully this time. The latch clicked into place. The sound echoed softly through the cabin. Evelyn turned back toward the center home. Deliberate. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small pencil she had taken from the library, and glanced around for something to write on. Her eyes landed on a notebook sitting on a shelf near the table. She picked it up, opened it. Blank pages. Evelyn nodded once, then began to draw. Lines. Rough measurements, steps counted, angles guessed. She worked quietly, her movements steady, her attention fixed. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the cabin remained still, waiting. Evelyn didn't rush. She stayed where she was for a while, the pencil resting between her fingers, the notebook open on the table. The lines she had drawn were rough, but clear enough to show what she already knew. The inside didn't match the outside, not by a small margin, by enough to matter. She closed the notebook gently and set it down, then walked back to the center of the room, her boots making that same uneven echo against the floorboards. There it was again, that hollow shift. Not obvious, but not right. Evelyn stood still, listening to the silence settle after her last step. Then she moved again. Slower this time. One step. Pause. Another. Pause. She followed the sound, not the space. Let her ears guide her instead of her eyes. It led her back toward the fireplace. She stopped in front of it. The stone structure filled most of the wall, rising from the floor to just below the beams overhead. Large river rocks, fitted tightly together. The kind of work that took time, skill, patience. Evelyn stepped closer, ran her hand lightly along the surface. Cold, solid, nothing loose. She crouched slightly, studying the base. The stones near the floor showed faint wear. Not damage, just use. A slight smoothing in places where something, or someone, had touched them more often than the rest. Her fingers moved slowly across the surface. Left, then right, then lower. She paused. One section felt different. Not loose, not moving, just worn in a way the others weren't. Evelyn leaned closer, narrowing her eyes. It wasn't the stone itself. It was the edge, the place where stone met stone. Her fingers traced at the line again. Yes, she whispered. She stood up slowly, looked around the room. No one. Nothing. Just the quiet. Evelyn turned back to the fireplace, placed her hand flat against that one section, and pressed. At first, nothing. Then, a sound. Low, deep, like something shifting far beneath the surface. Evelyn froze, her hand still against the stone. The sound continued. A slow grinding, metal against weight, something moving that hadn't moved in a long time. Then, the floor. A thin line appeared just in front of the fireplace. Barely visible at first. Then wider. The wooden boards separated with a quiet precision, revealing a narrow seam that hadn't been there seconds before. Evelyn stepped back instinctively. The section of floor lifted slightly, then slid to the side with a controlled, deliberate motion. Not broken. Not collapsing. Designed. The opening revealed itself fully. A square cut into the floor. Darkness below. Cool air rose from it, brushing against her face. It carried a scent. Old wood, paper, something preserved. Evelyn stood there, staring down into it. Her breathing slowed. Not fear. Not yet. Focus. She stepped closer. Looked down. Stone steps. Narrow. Descending into the dark. She glanced back at the door. Still closed. The cabin silent. Untouched. Then back at the opening. Evelyn walked to the workbench near the wall and picked up a flashlight. Tested it once. The beam flickered, then steadied into a narrow cone of light. Good enough. She returned to the opening. Stood at the edge. The air coming up from below was colder than the room behind her. Still. Controlled. This wasn't hidden by accident, she said quietly. Her voice didn't echo. It just settled. Evelyn placed one foot on the first step. Tested it. Solid. She shifted her weight, then took the second step. The light from the cabin above stretched down with her, fading quickly as she descended. The beam from the flashlight cut through the darkness in a tight circle, revealing stone walls on either side. Smooth. Deliberate. Not natural. Each step creaked less than the last. As if the deeper she went, the more insulated the space became from the world above. Evelyn moved slowly, carefully. Her hand brushed lightly against the wall for balance. Cold stone. Dry. No moisture, no decay. She counted without realizing it. 7 steps. 8. 9. Then, the ground leveled out. Evelyn stepped off the last stair and stopped. Raised the flashlight. The beam moved across the space in front of her. And then she saw it. Shelves. Lined along the walls. Perfectly straight. Wooden, but reinforced. Built to hold weight. Boxes, crates, stacked with care. Glass cabinets reflecting the narrow light. A desk in the center of the room. Everything arranged with the same precision she had seen upstairs. Only here, it was more deliberate, more contained. Evelyn took a slow step forward, then another. The sound of her boots was softer here, absorbed by the space instead of echoed. She moved the light across the nearest crate. Labels. Handwritten. Dates. Careful script. Her fingers hovered just above the surface. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Her eyes moved across the room again, taking it in, measuring it the same way she had measured the cabin above. "This is where the space went," she said quietly. The words felt small compared to the room. Evelyn turned slowly, the beam of light moving with her, revealing more shelves, more boxes, more order. Nothing scattered, nothing rushed, everything placed exactly where it belonged. She looked back toward the stairs. The faint outline of the opening above was barely visible now, just a thin square of dim light. Then she looked forward again. Into the room. Into whatever had been hidden here for years. Evelyn took another step. This time she reached out, her fingers resting lightly against the edge of a crate. Solid. Real. She exhaled slowly, then tightened her grip on the flashlight and moved deeper into the room. The beam cut across the shelves in narrow strokes, revealing edges, corners, labels, pieces of something that didn't come together all at once. Evelyn moved slowly, not because she was afraid, because she understood this kind of place demanded patience. She stopped at the first crate, set the flashlight down on the edge of the shelf so the light angled across the lid. Her fingers hovered again, then pressed. The wood was solid, heavy, the lid sealed tight, but not locked. She worked it loose carefully, easing the edge upward until it gave with a soft crack of old wood separating. Inside, layers of paper, yellowed, carefully folded. Evelyn peeled one back. A canvas. She paused, then lifted it slightly into the light. A painting. Not decorative, not something picked up for a wall. Detailed. Alive in a way she didn't have the words for. Mountains, light, depth that seemed to reach beyond the frame. She stared at it for a long moment, then gently set it aside, leaning it against the crate. Underneath, another, and another, all wrapped the same way. Protected. Catalogued. Evelyn let out a slow breath. "This isn't storage," she said quietly. She closed the crate carefully and moved to the next. This one was smaller. Inside, books. Old ones, leather-bound, some with worn spines, others preserved in sleeves. She picked one up. The pages were thin, fragile, the print dense. Inside the front cover, a date. Early. Older than anything she had ever held before. Evelyn turned a few pages, then stopped. Set it back exactly where she found it. Her eyes moved to the shelves beyond. Glass cabinets lined the far wall. She walked toward them. The flashlight beam caught something metallic inside, reflecting light in small, sharp points. Coins. Rows of them, each placed carefully in individual holders, small labels beneath them. Dates, origins, notes. Evelyn leaned closer. Her reflection stared back at her faintly in the glass. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. Then she stepped back, turned slowly. The room stretched around her. Every wall filled, every space used, every object accounted for. Her attention shifted to the center, the desk. It sat alone, not cluttered like the shelves. Clear, intentional. Evelyn walked toward it. Her steps quieter now, measured. The surface held only two things, a leather-bound ledger and a stack of papers beside it. She reached for the ledger first, opened it. The pages were filled. Columns, entries, dates, descriptions. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the next, then another, each line detailed, each item listed. Acquisition dates, prices, locations, and next to them, values, updated, adjusted, tracked over time. Evelyn's brow tightened. She turned pages faster now. The entries continued, years, decades. The handwriting never changed. Same careful script she had seen on the letter, Thomas Bellamy. She stopped halfway through the book, ran her finger down a column, a name she recognized, not personally, from somewhere else. A newspaper, maybe. A conversation long ago. She turned another page. More names. More values. Numbers that didn't seem real in this space. Evelyn swallowed, her throat dry. "This can't be right," she said quietly. But the ledger didn't hesitate. It continued. Page after page, the numbers grew, expanded, multiplied. She flipped toward the back, the final entries. Neater, more spaced out, as if written with more time between them. Then the last page. Evelyn's hand slowed as she turned it. The paper settled flat under the light. A summary. Columns condensed into a single list. Categories. Paintings, books, coins, investments, each followed by a number. Her eyes moved down the page, adding them without meaning to, trying to make sense of it. Then she reached the bottom. A final figure, written clearly, underlined once, $265 million. Evelyn didn't move. The number sat there. Simple, complete, impossible. She read it again, then again. Her breath came in slower now. Shallower. She stepped back from the desk slightly. The room felt different. Not larger, just heavier. All of it. Everything around her. Each crate, each shelf, each object, connected to that number. Evelyn lowered herself onto the edge of the chair behind the desk. Not because she meant to sit. Because her legs stopped asking. The flashlight beam shifted slightly, casting long shadows across the walls. She looked down at her hands. They were steady, but not calm. Not anymore. She thought of the SUV, the overpass, the folded blanket, the coins counted for coffee. And then, this. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "This doesn't belong to me," she said softly. The words echoed faintly in the room. Not as doubt, as recognition. Evelyn looked up again. At the shelves, at the crates, at the life that had been built down here, piece by piece in silence. Then her eyes returned to the ledger. The number didn't change, didn't fade, didn't explain itself. It just remained. Solid. Certain. Evelyn leaned forward again, her fingers resting lightly on the page, tracing the line beneath the final figure. $265 million. She closed the book slowly, carefully, then sat there for a moment longer, listening. Not for sound, for something else. Understanding. And knowing. Whatever this was, it wasn't finished yet. Evelyn sat there in the dim light, the closed ledger resting beneath her hand. The number was still in her head, repeating without meaning to. Not because she didn't understand it. Because she did. She looked around the room again. This wasn't chaos. It wasn't luck. It wasn't someone hiding things without thought. It was structure. Time. Attention. Evelyn stood up slowly. Her knees protested, but she ignored it, picked up the flashlight again, and moved back toward the desk. The second stack of papers sat neatly beside where the ledger had been. She hadn't touched them yet. Now she did. The top sheet was thicker than the rest. Not part of the inventory. Not financial. Personal. She lifted it carefully. The handwriting was the same. Thomas Bellamy. Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest. Not fear. Something closer to anticipation. She began to read. The words weren't formal, not like the letter from the law office. They were direct, measured. I have spent many years watching people from a distance. Evelyn paused, then continued. Not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. People show you who they are when they think no one is paying attention. Her eyes moved slower now. I did not choose you by chance. Evelyn's breath caught slightly. She read the line again. Not by chance. Her fingers tightened on the page. Your husband, Daniel Hart, was a man who spoke very little about himself. But he spoke about you, not in detail, not often, just enough. Daniel. The name landed differently here, not as memory, as presence. Evelyn swallowed, continued reading. I attended his service. I stood where I could see without being seen. You did not look at me. That was expected. You were occupied with what mattered. Her mind flashed back to the photograph. The man in the background. Watching. She sat down again without realizing it. The paper trembled slightly in her hand, but her eyes didn't leave the page. I began observing from that day forward, not constantly, not intrusively, but enough to understand the shape of your life. Evelyn let out a slow breath. You've got no right, she said under her breath. But she kept reading. I saw the years that followed, the illness, the hospital visits, the hours spent waiting in chairs that were never meant for rest. Her jaw tightened. The words weren't guesses. They were specific, too specific. You did not leave when leaving would have been easier. You did not look for advantage. You did not ask for more than what was needed to continue. Evelyn looked up from the page. The room felt closer now, not threatening, just aware. She looked around, as if expecting to find someone standing there. There was no one, only the quiet, only the weight of what had been left behind. She looked back down. After his passing, your life changed. Not suddenly, but steadily. Loss does not arrive all at once. It builds. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Then opened them again. You made decisions that cost you stability. Not because you were careless, because you chose not to become something else. Her throat tightened. She didn't argue with that. She couldn't. I continued to observe, not out of pity, out of certainty. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. There are many people who succeed when conditions are favorable. There are very few who remain consistent when they are not. She read the line again. Slowly, letting it settle. I chose you because you did not change in ways that would have been easier. Evelyn's hand lowered slightly, the paper dipping with it. She stared at the floor for a second, then raised it again. What you have found beneath this cabin is not simply a collection. It is a record of decisions, of time, of patience. Her eyes moved faster now, searching. You may believe this does not belong to you. That is a natural conclusion. It is also incorrect. Evelyn shook her head slightly. No, she whispered. No, that's not how this works. But she kept reading. Ownership is not defined by origin. It is defined by judgment. I have made mine. Her grip tightened. You will face pressure. From those who believe proximity entitles them to control. From those who will question your capacity. Evelyn thought of Derek. Of his voice on the phone. Measured. Helpful. Calculated. Her jaw set. They will frame their intentions as concern. It will not be concern. Evelyn let out a short breath. Of course it won't, she said quietly. The room seemed to settle around her. Not shifting, not changing, just confirming. She turned the page. The final section was shorter, more direct. Everything you need to understand what has been built is here. You will find it if you take the time to look. Evelyn glanced toward the shelves again, toward the crates, the records, the system. Do not rush your decisions. This place was not built quickly. It should not be dismantled that way. She nodded slightly without thinking. You were not chosen because of what you lost. You were chosen because of what you did not lose. Evelyn's eyes stopped. That line stayed. She didn't move. Didn't read further. Then slowly, she lowered the page. Her hands rested on the desk. The flashlight beam flickered slightly, then steadied again. Evelyn sat there in silence. The words didn't feel like instructions. They felt like recognition. Not complete, not comfortable, but real. She looked around the room again. Everything in its place. Everything accounted for. Everything waiting. Not for anyone. For her. Evelyn folded the paper carefully, placed it back on the desk, then leaned back slightly in the chair. Her breathing evened out. Not calm, but controlled. She looked toward the stairs, then back at the room, then down at her hands. They're going to come, she said quietly. Not fear, not doubt, just fact. She stood up slowly, picked up the flashlight again, and turned toward the shelves. This time, she didn't hesitate. If this had been built for her to understand, then she was going to understand it. Every piece, every detail, every reason, and she was going to do it before anyone else had the chance to take it from her. But standing there in that quiet room, surrounded by a life someone else had built piece by piece, something shifted. Not all at once. Just enough. Evelyn looked down at her hands. Same hands that had counted coins for coffee. Same hands that had folded that thin blanket under the overpass. Nothing about them had changed. And yet, someone had watched those hands when no one else did. Not when things were easy, not when it would have made sense, but when it didn't, when it cost something. She turned slowly, taking in the room again, not the value, not the number written in that ledger, but the time it represented, the patience, the waiting. He hadn't just left her something. He had trusted her with it, and for the first time since she opened that letter, Evelyn didn't feel like she had stepped into someone else's life. She felt like she had finally been seen in her own. The room didn't feel hidden anymore. It felt held. She exhaled, long and steady, the kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding for years. Then she picked up the ledger again, not to check the number, but to understand the story behind it. Because this wasn't about what was left. It was about why. And maybe, how long someone had been quietly believing in her when she had stopped believing in herself. So tell me, how many times has someone already seen your strength before you ever did?